History of early childhood education. View of the child. A historical perspective is important when considering the evolution of current philosophy and practice in the education of children in the early years. By looking at the evolutionary process, we see that the concept of childhood is a relatively new one. The attitude of the time is in response to societal beliefs. Religion plays a major role, as does the harsh realities of the times. Keep in mind that the world was a very different place in the not-so-distant and distant past. When considering the common practice of the times, ask yourself, why would parents at that time think that that practice was necessary? And how might the practice reflect the politics, religious beliefs, or reality of the time? Ancient times to 4th century AD. Prevailing attitude was that the child was a burden and had no soul. Common practices included killing infants who were ill or deformed and murdering infants in times of war and famine. 4th century to 13th century. Abandonment. Prevailing attitude was that the child was full of evil. Common practices included sending children with problems to substitute families or to religious sects to be raised as monks or nuns, isolating children or leaving them, selling children as slaves or property, or swaddling children by tying or wrapping them up in restraint devices. 14th century to 17th century. Ambivalence. Prevailing attitude was that the child, an unformed animal, to be molded into shape. Common practices included becoming emotionally involved with the child but in a negative way, being attracted to and disliking the child, assuming the onerous responsibility of childbearing. 18th century. Intrusive. Prevailing attitude was that the child was to be conquered. Common practices included some abandonment of children, child labor, prayed with but not played with, enlightenment for some families who believed that the quality of a child's life had some importance in the child's development, lower infant mortality rates, introduction of pediatric medicine, first primary education, and smallpox vaccine. 19th century to mid-20th century. Socialization. Prevailing attitude was that the child was to be trained. Common practices included children being loved based on how good they were. Children were supposed to fit into the goals of adult society. Children dressed as adults. Children trained to become members of society. Father begins to take a part in the training, rearing of the child. First Children's Hospital established in 1850, and immunizations against childhood diseases became popular. Mid-20th century to the present. Helping. Prevailing attitudes is and was that the child is to be valued. Common practices include children viewed as active, creative, and having intrinsic value, children being loved unconditionally regardless of behavior, empathy and an obligation to provide whatever is necessary for the child's well-being, increased involvement by parents as a result of education as well as a personal interest in their own childhood, goal of producing offspring who would surpass the parents in terms of economic status, education, and health. Both parents involved in child rearing, giving the child what he or she needs to develop full potential, respect for this stage of human development as the most important, and increased funding for childcare as a public policy issue. When we look back at the history of early childhood education, I find some of the practices and beliefs quite shocking. To think, in present day, we value children as one of our most treasured members of society. Today, we view children as competent beings who we must care for, love, and protect. We now know that the first years of a human's life are the most important in terms of shaping who they will become.